Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Matthew here at the South Carolina State Museum Observatory. So, we're just getting things started here. We have a couple of little challenges tonight. The first of which is that I wanted to look at some really faint things, but today is actually kind of a cloudy evening. It's not like really super completely cloudy, but it's kind of hazy. And because it's kind of hazy, it makes it hard for us to see things that are kind of faint and far away, like the Orion Nebula that we've been looking at these past couple of evenings or past couple of live streams. It also makes the other object I wanted to show, which is another nebula, kind of hard. So the best thing for us to look at this evening is actually, believe it or not, the moon. If you go outside and look off to the west, you'll see a really beautiful crescent moon. Our challenge with the moon right now is that it's actually low in the sky as well. So the telescope, we're trying to actually find the moon with the telescope. So what I am working on doing here is getting us a really cool picture of the moon that we've taken in the past to look at. And while we have that up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go finish getting the telescope pointed at the moon. It's all powered up. It's got the camera on it. It's actually pointing roughly in the direction of the moon, but I think it just missed it a little bit. So we're going to actually find the moon for you. So just a second here. We're going to show you one of our really cool past pictures of the moon here while I go and find the moon so we can see what it looks like tonight. All right, so with any luck, I can screen share that. There we go. Share screen. There's what I want. Woohoo! All right. So, yep, here's our lovely view of the moon that we've taken in the past. This one shows a bunch of craters, and it also shows those large, broad areas called maria. Those are those dark areas. Maria are actually ancient lava flows. So now that we have this picture of the moon up for you, I'm going to swing into the observatory and actually get with our telescope and get the telescope actually pointed directly on the moon. It's really super close, but it's just a little bit off. And this is actually something that our telescope does very often when we're trying to point at something that's really low down in the sky. So here we go. Enjoy our picture of the moon right now that we've taken in the past while I go work on getting us an actual view of the moon for tonight. So off we go. I'll be back. Well, hi everyone. I'm back and I have good news. We have a view of the moon tonight in our telescope. Now, if you go outside once again and look off to the west, you'll see the moon. It's a beautiful crescent moon tonight, and it's actually kind of low down to the horizon. What that meant is that pointing the telescope at the moon was quite a challenge. I actually had to kind of hunt and peck with the telescope a little bit. I wasn't able to use the sight that we usually use to aim the telescope precisely, so I sort of had to guess. So I'm about to show you the results of my guessing, so to speak. We actually did get the moon, and let me get that set up for you so you can see it. So we're going to stop one screen share here and start another. Here we go. This is actually going to be the live image of the moon. All right. Away we go. So there we have it. There's the moon tonight. It is a crescent for sure. So you can kind of see some of the craters. It's also a little bit of a blurry crescent, and one of the big reasons for that is that it's quite low down to the horizon. So when we're looking at the moon right now, we're actually looking through a lot of atmosphere. We're looking through a lot of air, and that air is actually distorting the light from the moon and making the moon kind of wobble around a bit, and also making the image just a little bit fuzzy. So that's definitely kind of a factor. It's really neat to be able to see the moon as kind of a crescent like it is tonight. But what it does mean is that it's going to look a little fuzzy. So once again, if you have any questions or comments or things you're curious about, feel free to put those in the chat. We'll try to get those answered for you here on the air. And otherwise, enjoy our view of the moon. While you're watching, I do encourage you to go outside and look at the moon because you're going to notice something really interesting. You'll see the lit part of the moon. So the lit part of the moon looking like a crescent, but then if you look beyond the lit part of the moon, you'll see that the moon actually looks like a full circle with a big chunk of the moon outside that crescent faintly lit up like a faint glow. Sometimes this is referred to as the old moon in the new moon's arms. And it's actually, well, the scientific word is earthshine. So what's happening is that light, well, first of all, I should back up here. So the moon shines by reflected light from the sun, right? So what happens though is the earth also shines with reflected light from the sun. And what will happen is that light from the earth, that's of course sunlight, technically, goes and bounces off the moon and lights up that part of the moon that's not lit in a very faint glow. And again, that's called earthshine. So I do encourage you to go out and look for Earthshine or the old moon in the new moon's arms. Actually, the crescent moon is my favorite phase of the moon because of Earthshine. I think seeing the moon fairly low in the west in like twilight with Earthshine visible is one of the most beautiful sights, especially if there's a planet there like Venus or Mercury nearby. We don't have that tonight, but seeing a crescent moon and then Venus and Mercury or something like that, I think is one of the most beautiful twilight scenes we can have in the night sky. Now, it should be possible to actually see Earthshine in the telescope, but to do that, I'm going to have to really wonk around with our camera settings here. So we're going to end up really turning up the exposure on the camera, and we're going to lose the view of the crescent. So all those craters and such are going to go away. It's going to come very overexposed, as you can see happening now. I'm going to turn another control up. It's going to become even more overexposed. There we go. All righty. Let's see if we can see this on the screen share. So if you're looking at the lit part of the moon, do you see that over to the right? Can you see the rest of the moon illuminated as like a really faint glow? I'm going to try to turn up our gain a little more to make that more obvious. There we go. So can you see the rest of the moon, especially up and to the right? Can you see the rest of the moon kind of lit up very, very faintly? If you can, pop in the chat. Let me know if you can see that. Especially look to the upper right of the image. Becky says, I see it. Fantastic. I'm going to try to move the telescope just a smidge to see if we can get a slightly better view of it. So I'm going to make some really slow motions with the telescope here. Sometimes if we move the lit part of the moon out of the way a little bit, we can actually see that Earth shine a little better. So do you see the moon moving? That's actually because I'm actually moving the telescope very slowly. There we go. I kind of like that. So now you can really see that glow. You can see the lit side of the moon there on the left. And of course, with the way we have the camera set right now, it's really lit up. Then over to the right, you can see the rest of the moon lit up very, very faintly. And again, that's Earthshine right there. The other thing I'm seeing in this image is some clouds moving over the moon. Do you see that there's some like hazy stuff moving from left to right in the image? So that hazy stuff right there is actually clouds. And that's actually the reason why we had to kind of change plans tonight, because tonight we were going to look at some more faint stuff, like nebula type stuff. But when we have these thin, high clouds like we do tonight, it actually becomes hard to see those faint nebula type objects. And we really kind of need to really focus more on things like the moon or a planet if there's a planet in the sky. So tonight we have the crescent moon, which is really, really great because we can actually see Earth shine. So once again, if you have any comments, feel free to pop those in the questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the view on Earthshine for just a few minutes, and then I'm going to switch it back to where we can actually see the craters and such on the lit side of the moon. And then maybe later on in the hour, we'll go and look at Earthshine again. So we're going to hang out looking at Earthshine, looking at how beautiful that is, and then we'll go have a look at the craters again. And once again, I do encourage you to go outside and see Earthshine for yourself. One of my favorite things to see in the evening sky. And really, Crescent Moon is the best time to see it. Christina says, I just went out to look, could really see the Earthshine from my yard. Yeah. The moon is actually a fairly young crescent right now. New moon was just a few days ago, so it's a pretty thin crescent. And when we have a thin crescent like we do tonight, um, there's actually less glare from the lit side of the moon to drown out Earthshine. So when we have a thin crescent like we do this evening, it's one of the best times to go see Earthshine. It still looks like we got a bunch of clouds moving in front of the moon for sure. All right, I'm going to switch this back so we can actually see the lit side of the moon itself, because that's pretty cool to look at too. So I'm going to change our camera settings. You'll see me actually make those changes. Let's turn the gain down. Okay, now we're starting to see that lit side again. Let's turn the exposure down. Still kind of overexposed. There we go. Now we can see those craters and such over there on the lit side of the moon. And you can really see from this perspective how thin the crescent is tonight. It is quite a thin crescent this evening. One of the things we can do is we can drive the telescope around again to see different parts of that crescent. So let's do that. So I'm going to very slowly move the telescope here. So we're going to go kind of look more at the bottom part of the crescent there. And again, you see our image of the moon moving. It's not the moon itself moving around in the sky. It's me moving the telescope. Let's just get this a little bit centered up a little better here. There we go. And now we can see a different part of the crescent. I might need to adjust our camera settings just a bit. Let's see what happens if I take the exposure down just a teeny tiny little bit here. There we go. So there's another view of the crescent moon right there. So here's a question for you. We're actually about to have a big celebration with the Apollo 16th 50th anniversary coming up. So we're going to have some really cool events here at the museum throughout the month of April for Apollo 16. But one of the questions that people often ask is, can you see the the lunar landers and rovers and footprints on the moon with a telescope? And if you can or can't, why or why not? So I know that was a lot. So first of all, do you think you can see things from the Apollo missions, like the footprints and the lunar lander and all of that, with our telescope? And if we can, why? If we can't, why not? What do you think? Pop that in the comments. So once again, do you think you can see in our telescope things like the footprint from the Apollo astronauts? or things like the lunar lander, the lunar rover? What do you think? Yes or no? So Anthony says no. I'm gonna guess no, but have nothing to back it up. All right. Fantastic. We're getting some thoughts in. Christina says no. All right. So let's start thinking about this. The moon is about 240,000 miles away from the Earth. So basically, the moon is about 240,000 miles away from our telescope because our telescope is right here on the Earth. You actually can see things like the lunar rovers and places where the soil has been disturbed by astronauts in pictures from spacecraft. There's, for example, a spacecraft called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter that has a very high resolution camera. That camera can actually show things like the lunar module. Here's the deal: our telescope is 240,000 miles away from the moon. Or the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter orbits the moon at a height of about 30 miles. So basically, it's about 30 miles away from the moon. That's like the distance from Columbia to the west side of Camden. So it's actually a much, 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 much closer, the spacecraft. So if you're a spacecraft in orbit around the moon, then yeah, you'll be able to see the lunar module and such if you're using a really high resolution camera. But with our telescope, we actually can't. It's 240,000 miles away, and really the smallest things we can see with our telescope on the moon, like the smallest craters and surface features, are actually a few miles across. So if you think about seeing a few miles across, those footprints are a few feet across. The lunar lander is probably something like a few meters across, probably a little bigger than that, but still, it's not that large. Um, at our distance with our telescope, it's not something we could see. But if you happen to be orbiting the moon in a spacecraft about 30 miles above the surface, you could see it. So we're going to hang out just a few more minutes having a look here at the moon here, the lit side, and then we're going to change those camera settings again so we can have a look at Earthshine again. But we'll look at Earthshine down here at this bottom part of the moon. So that's what we have coming up here in just a few minutes. And we'll see how many clouds are moving in front of the moon then. There definitely were a few minutes ago, so we'll see if there are then when we change to look at the Earthshine view. Oh, I'm noticing our image is faded out just a bit. That could actually mean that the clouds have gotten just a little thicker. It could also be because the moon is actually getting lower and lower in the sky as we go through the hour. Yeah, I'm looking at my big view here. It's definitely dimmer. So we're looking through progressively more and more atmosphere. It's actually one of the things about the waxing crescent moon, which is what we have tonight, is that a waxing crescent, especially when it's just a few days past new moon, you always see it in the evening sky low over in the west, and then it actually sets pretty early in the night. So, like, if I were to go outside right now and look at the moon, it would look noticeably lower in the sky than it did when we started, and it would be even harder than it was uh, about 30 minutes ago or so to point the telescope at the moon because it's now getting really low down to the horizon. I can actually tell you how high the moon is right now. Let's look on my telescope software here. The moon is about 16 degrees above the western horizon right now. Now, what that means is that we're actually pushing limits in terms of how low an object we can see to the horizon from our telescope here at the museum. So the moon's 16 degrees up above the horizon in the west. Here at the museum, our telescope can see an object in the west down to about 10 degrees. So, yeah, Anita, it looks so low. Anita, did you go outside? So yeah, we can actually see down to about 10 degrees with our telescope when we're looking to the west. So that's actually something that really plays in when we're doing our daily solar observing, especially like around Christmas when it gets dark really early, is by about 4 o'clock, 4:15 in the afternoon when we're around the winter solstice, the sun has actually gotten too low for the telescope to see. So we're kind of seeing the same thing now. The moon's getting super low. And again, our limit's about 10 degrees. So really by the time we finish up at 8:30 here, we're going to be kind of at the limit of how low an object we can see with our telescope. So just going to kind of throw a question out for you, and I want you all to take a wild guess at this. Don't try to get it right or anything. Just try to take a wild stab at it. What do you think we actually end up pointing our telescope at if we look below about 10 degrees? Or actually, I should rephrase that. What do you think is actually blocking objects from our telescope's view when they go below 10 degrees in the west? What do you think's in the way? What's getting in the telescope's way to keep us from seeing those things? I'll give you a hint. The thing that's in the way is big, and I'm in it right now. If I don't see any guesses show up in a minute, I'm going to start singing the Jeopardy theme song. Just kidding. Anthony says the building. Okay. Earth. See if we get any more thoughts in here. Christina says the building. And that's actually exactly what we have to deal with. Are you in a tree? Well, I'm here in the museum right now. There are trees outside the museum, but actually, if we're looking off to the west and we point the telescope super, super low, the museum building actually gets in the way. So, what is going to happen here in probably just about the time we wrap up tonight, is that the moon is going to, from our perspective here in the observatory, which is up on the fourth floor of the building, the moon is actually going to go behind the museum building to the west. So if we were to go out and on like the canal path and look at a very open western horizon, we'd see the moon's low to the west. But from the observatory, it's actually gone behind the building. So yep, that's what gets in our way, is the building. It's actually kind of fun, especially to in that time of year, like around Christmas, to be up here in the observatory around 4:15 when we're doing our solar observing, because we can actually watch the moon. Excuse me, we can actually watch the sun rather set behind the building. And as it goes behind the building, we see it gradually start to disappear and get darker until it goes away completely. It's actually kind of a fun thing to watch. So Anita is joking with us. Are you in a tree? Well, maybe I am. Maybe I'm a cat and I climbed a tree. Well, let's see if we can have a look at Earthshine again. So I'm going to go and change our camera settings. It'll be interesting to see if we can see Earthshine now with the moon as low as it is. So we're going to really turn up our exposure up to maximum and our gain as well. And we see Earthshine. Yep, there it is. So now I've got the camera set where we're heavily overexposing the lit part of the moon, but we're able to see down to the right, you'll see where the moon is lit up very faintly. I've really had to turn the camera settings up a lot, even more than I did earlier tonight in our program, because the moon has gotten so much lower in the sky. So you should still see that Earth shine there down to the lower right now. I want to do a little bit more tweaking here. See if we can make it a little more obvious for you. There we go. So again, to the right, you'll see that Earth shine, but we've really had to turn the camera settings way up. I'm going to do a little bit of moving around to the telescope again to see if I can make our Earth shine view a little bit more distinct. Let's see what I can do here. Yep, so the moon's now about 15 degrees above the horizon, so it's definitely getting lower. So just doing some little tweaks of the telescope. There we go. So now if you look off to the right, you're definitely going to see that lit up dark part of the moon there. And I'm actually going to turn the camera settings up even more to make them even more obvious. Whoop. Always a little bit of trial and error, especially we're kind of really doing some fun things with our camera here. We're not in any danger of damaging the camera, but we are kind of pushing it to its limits a little bit. Yeah, so Anita said, I've noticed the sunset, it's closer to its spring and early summer area. Yep. So we're now in March. We're still on standard time, but the sunset has definitely gotten a lot later than it was around Christmas. And the other thing we'll see is that as we start moving into the summer, the sun is actually going to set further and further to the north. So during the really dark parts of the year, like in November and December, the sun sets in the southwest. But now, as we go, we're approaching the spring equinox, and then as we get past the spring equinox later this month, the sun is going to start to set north of west, and we'll really start to see that. And one thing I should mention is that we're about to go back on daylight saving time. So March 13th, that's actually next weekend, we're going to go back on daylight saving time. And one of the problems that's going to give us is it's going to mean that we would have to start these live streams about an hour later. So we would have to start them at like 9 o'clock. And then as we get into like the summer, they'd have to start at maybe even as late as 10 o'clock. So it starts becoming really late and actually kind of hard on our staff. And we've got a lot of other things coming up, like all of these Apollo things, and we've got our spring break camps and summer camps coming up. And we're also going to be slowly bringing back some on-site in-person viewing, like with our lunar eclipse night on May 15th here at the museum. The museum will be open for that event. So because of that, this is actually going to be our last live stream for a while. We're still going to continue our virtual sky tours that Liz does, so keep an eye out for those. Those are going to continue. But the telescope live streams we're going to put on hiatus since we're going into the time of year when it just gets darker a lot later. And then it makes it more challenging to staff and to make these events happen. But with that, I hope you'll come to the museum and see the telescope in person. I hope you'll watch Liz's Liz's live sky tours, because we're going to continue those. I'm actually going to be helping with those, so that's going to be kind of fun. So you'll actually see me on those telescope live streams. Nah, I just said something real goofy. You're actually going to see me on those those virtual sky tours, not telescope live streams. I can't talk. It's like I need to move the telescope a little bit more so we can maintain that view of Earth shine. Oh, Anita says, gonna miss it. Yeah, I know. Well, let's see how low the moon has gotten now. 14 degrees above the horizon. So we are about 4 degrees above when the moon goes too low for our telescope to see. So I think we're going to barely make that. By the time we end at 8:30 rather, we should still be able to see the moon, but it's going to be starting to get really, really low. So if you're wondering, the moon actually sets tonight at 9:35. So we're just about an hour and a half away from moon set. So if you want to see the moon tonight, I highly recommend going out as soon as you can. And especially now that the moon's gotten even lower, we're going to need to, you're going to need to have a very open horizon. So if you have like a lot of trees on your western horizon, you might not be able to see the moon now as it's gotten so low. And for those of you who I know, say Christina says, I'm going to miss these live streams as well. So for those of you who are like, oh no, these are going away, I do encourage you to come to the museum. We're doing daily solar observing. We're slowly looking at getting our nighttime observing back. The planetarium is running planetarium shows, and we've got the Apollo 16 events going on in April. So there's a lot going on actually here at the museum. So I do encourage you, if you can, to actually make the trip here to the museum here in Columbia and visit us. We would love to see you. That's great, Anita. Trying to get a group from here to come. That's fantastic. Wonderful. Well, just a few minutes we have left. Let's get back to our view of the actual moon's lit side so we can see those craters. So let me adjust our camera so we can make that happen for you. All right, so we are going to turn our camera down now. There we go. I can start to see those craters there off to the left. Woohoo! But wow, I really need to have the exposure turned up a lot to actually be able to see the moon. That actually tells us either one or two things, or it could be both. Number one, it tells us the moon's really low to the horizon now. And that means that we're losing some of the light from the moon through all that thick atmosphere there close to the horizon. The other thing, and I don't know this because I haven't been outside. I've been in here chatting with you all. But if I were to go outside, just looking at how much I've had to turn up the camera settings, I wonder if there actually are some clouds that have moved in front of the moon. So it'd be really interesting if you can go outside and you have a view of the moon. It would be interesting. Of course, your clouds would be different from ours here in Colombia, but it'd be interesting to go out and see if the moon looks sort of cloudy or kind of orange colored or such. We are looking through a lot of atmosphere now. So, if anyone has any questions as we approach the end of the hour, feel free to pop those questions in the chat. Perfectly happy to answer those. Love getting questions. So, have any questions about the moon, about space in general, about astronomy here at the museum, or what we have going on right now? Um, please feel free to ask in the comments. Well, Anita says good night. Awesome. And Anita, I hope to see you and your group here at the museum before too long. So this is a great time in our last 5 minutes while we're looking at the moon as it gets closer and closer down to the horizon. This is a great time for bad space jokes. Are we ready for some bad space jokes? Sure. So would you rather eat in a restaurant on the moon or on the Earth? So I would rather eat at a restaurant on the Earth because the Earth has more atmosphere. Okay, that was really bad, wasn't it? Would you rather eat a moon rock or an earth rock? Well, the moon rock would be a little meatier, so maybe the moon rock. That was even worse, right? What are we gonna do? The moon's getting low to the horizon. It's hazy out. We're in our last few minutes. It's perfect time for some really bad space jokes. I don't see any laughing in the comments, though, so that means these jokes must be really, really bad. Did you hear about the cows that NASA launched into low Earth orbit? It's the herd shot round the world. Okay, that was even worse. I should probably stop the bad space jokes now while I'm ahead, right? Actually, I didn't make these up myself. A really good friend of mine who teaches astronomy at the University of Arizona and runs his wonderful astronomy camp program actually came up with those really bad space jokes. And when he's talking with a group, like at the beginning of a camp or beginning of a class, he uses those questions as icebreakers to make everyone groan. Notice how faint the moon's gotten now. It's really getting low to the horizon. Let's just have a look. And first of all, I'm going to see if we can turn our camera up just a little more to maintain a little more visibility here. Yep, there we go. And now let's actually see how high the moon is above the horizon now. So I'm going to look at our telescope control software. The moon is 12 degrees above the horizon. So we are really, really looking low here. All right. Well, we're going to go on and call it a night. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, this is actually our last live stream for a while because of the switch to daylight saving time coming up and the fact that it's going to get darker a lot later. So we hope to see you at the museum and check out the website. There's going to be lots of cool things going on here at the museum over the next few months. So we look forward to seeing you here um, in both the observatory and the planetarium. Remember that our planetarium virtual sky tours that Liz does every 2 weeks, those will be continuing. And we'll see you later. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. And bye, everyone. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.